My name is Jerome Ferry. My cameraman is Alan Eggers. We're doing a video interview with two sisters, Alice Smith and Elizabeth Berry, who were born and reared in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. One of you, Alice, let's ask you, when were you born and where in Cedar Rapids?
I was born at St. Luke's Hospital and in 1924.
And Alice, or Elizabeth, how about you?
I was born in St. Luke's Hospital in 1921.
So you're about 2 years and some
2 years, 8 months difference.
Were you close growing up?
I think so. We had an older brother. He was 8 years older than I was, and so I grew up instead of as a middle child, more as the older of two. And I can remember when we'd go out to play, Mother would say, "Elizabeth, you look after your little sister," which I don't think my little sister liked too well.
Alice, what was your folks' name?
Alice and Malcolm Thompson.
And what did your dad, was his occupation?
Well, he had been in the he had a men's haberdasher store in Cedar Rapids before I was born, and I guess it was shortly before I was born, he lost his lease. They were going to erect the Mercer's National Bank building, and he simply went out of business. And then after that, he became an insurance agent with Aetna.
Okay. And where did you girls go to school? Grade school.
Went to Arthur. Then after Arthur, we went to Franklin, and Franklin at that time was 6 years. That was long before they had torn down the old Washington, but they hadn't built the new Washington. So we had 6 years at Franklin.
Did you raise a family, Alice?
No. I married later, and my husband already had 2 children, and at the time we were married, Leslie was just starting college, and Warren was in high school.
And how about you, Elizabeth?
Don and I have 2 sons. The oldest son, Donald, he's also Donald Thompson, has 3 children, Ivan, Heather, and Kezzy. And Ivan and Heather were born when they were living and working in Turkey, and Kezzy was born in Massachusetts, where they now live.
Yeah. I got a lot of topics here. I'm going to pick your memory about memories long time ago. And the first one is railroad travel. The old Union Station.
Yes, we remember. And I remember that Mother told us that when the Union Station was built and opened, they had a big party down there, and she remembers her parents getting all dressed up and going to that party when it opened. But we would take the train into Chicago. It was, I don't know, I guess about 4 hours in, and it was easy. You could get breakfast on the train, and you could even go in for the day and come back that evening. It was wonderful. And then as a family, they had the Streamliners in the mid-30s, and we had relatives in Seattle, and we took a trip one summer on the Streamliner to Portland and then up to Seattle. Oh, I guess first we went across the northern states, North Dakota and Montana, the first time we went to Seattle. And then I guess we came back the other route.
The train we took to Chicago probably was most times the city of Denver, and the train that we would have taken out west was the city of Portland. I think there was another one, city of San Francisco, I think. I'm not sure, but I know there was the city of Denver and the city of Portland.
Your dad being in the clothing business, did he have to make a lot of train trips because of his business, or was this more or less pleasure trips?
Well, this was a pleasure trip to Seattle. We had an uncle living there and other relatives. But he was out of the clothing business when I was born, and Liz was too tiny to remember, I'm sure.
Okay.
The only thing I remember about his clothing business, he had these books, after it was all over, he had these books with all kinds of samples of shirts, the material, and we would play with those books. We had more fun playing with those books, and then he also had saved things from his store, like some beautiful gloves and things like that.
This is a picture of your mother and the 3 children. What was your brother's name again?
He was Malcolm M. Thompson, Jr. We called him Mac.
And this is a picture of the 2 sisters. How old were you?
We think about 8 for Liz and about 5 for me.
Horses, trolleys, any memories of?
Just remember, we remember riding on the streetcar. And then when we were in, I think I was in high school when they switched to buses. But I can remember going downtown on the trolley with Mother on the streetcar. It ran right by our house because it ran up First Avenue. We grew up over here on First Avenue across from 22nd Street.
Do you ever recall taking it out to Marion?
No.
Kenwood?
No. Just about as far as our house.
How about your dad's first automobile? Do either one of you remember what it was?
Well, I don't know if it was the first, but the first we can remember is one that was called a Marmon. And
Go ahead, pull it.
I think this is a picture of the Marmon. And there is our dog is in the back seat.
Tilted forward.
Yeah. There you go. Good shot. What's the dog's name?
Oh, that would have been Flossie,
Flossie.
the first one we had.
How about floods in Cedar Rapids? Do either one of you remember the 1929 flood?
I remember going down, Dad wanted us all to get in the car and go down and take a look at it. And, of course, we couldn't get very close to it, but you could get downtown, and the whole downtown was flooded. I can just remember that going down. I don't know if you can remember that or not.
Well, I've either heard about it or I remember it vaguely.
but I can remember going down and looking at it.
Alice would have been about 5 years old.
It was on the west side that I remember. I guess the flooding was worse over there.
About newspapers, did either one of you have a newspaper route? Or?
No, we didn't do that, but I can remember when the newspaper would come. It was an evening newspaper then. It'd get there around 3 o'clock, and we'd come home from school. And at that time, from our house, we had a sidewalk that went out to First Avenue, and I can remember we'd get the paper and open it up to the comics and lie there on the sidewalk, well, in the summer, the spring or fall, reading the comics.
Mm-hmm. Back in those days, they would have extras when there was something very important had happened. Would they deliver that extra to the home separately?
I don't believe so. I think it was sold downtown, but people go down and get them. Whether they took it out in the neighborhoods, I don't know.
How about early radio?
Well, the family would gather in what we called our library on Sunday evening, and I remember listening to the radio with our parents. And probably my brother was there too. And I remember laughing uproariously at Eddie Cantor, something he did. And then, of course, later on, there were also good radio shows on weeknights, Fibber McGee and Molly and Fred Allen. And then sometimes we would come home from school in the afternoon.
Oh, yes, I would listen to Jack Armstrong, All-American Boy, and the Green Hornet, and then I'd send in for those little rings or something that Jack Armstrong had. The radio we listened to was it stood up about 3 or 4 feet tall. It was a big Philco, and it was over in one corner. And the one I remember Sunday night was Jack Benny with his Jell-O, and really the radio was wonderful because we weren't just all absorbed watching something, we'd listen to it.
Did your folks let you turn on the radio whenever you wanted to? Like teenagers nowadays, they have to have background noise all the time. Could you turn the radio on?
We could turn the radio on all the time, and we didn't have any, we didn't listen to the radio like they do now.
Any special memories about the telephones you had back then?
Just using it a lot when I was in 7th grade. I had a very good friend, and I would sit on the floor and talk to her for hours. She moved away at the end of 7th grade, so I can't remember doing that with any other friend.
We had a center hall on the first floor, and there was a phone there. It was on the wall. And if Allie were sitting on the floor, she must have been sitting right below it then on the floor because...
Well, it had a fairly long cord, I think.
Oh, and there were a few steps a little ways away where you could go.
How about your postman? Did they...
He came twice a day, which was wonderful. You'd get morning mail, and then you would get if you had any mail, you'd get it in the afternoon too. And it was terrible when they cut out the afternoon mail. When Don was in the service, I, of course, would be anxiously looking for those letters. He was over on the island of Tinian, and we had a really nice mail carrier, and
he'd ring the bell. If a letter came, he'd ring the bell to let us know there was one there right away.
How about the milkmen? Did you have people that come around and delivered
Yes.
your milk
Early morning.
in glass jars?
Glass jars.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
And ice cream men, did they have ice cream men that would come around in the neighborhood in the summertime?
Well, what we remember is Krebs Dutch Girl, which made excellent ice cream at the time, had a horse-drawn cart or wagon painted blue and white, which would come down First Avenue, and it had an umbrella over the top, and they sold little cups of ice cream for a nickel, I believe, and we would go up on the hill just above our house, and we could see quite far up First Avenue from there, and we would watch for the truck, and we would run right out in the middle of First Avenue, and he would stop, and we would buy our nickel ice cream cup.
Did
And
he?
there wasn't enough traffic to worry about.
Yeah.
He would just stop in the middle of First Avenue, and we'd run out.
You know, in those days, when we went to school, after school, no problem. The folks never worried about us crossing First Avenue. No lights anywhere near, but it didn't make any difference. We just, there wasn't enough traffic to worry about.
We remember that the traffic began to increase on First Avenue when Collins built their plant up at 35th Street. And after that, the traffic increased a great deal then and just steadily increased from then on.
The ice cream man, did he have some type of device to ring or
He had a bell.
bang?
Yeah.
Or so
But
you,
we could see quite far up First Avenue when we went to the top of the hill.
He came about noon, around 12 or 12:30. He evidently started out from the Krebs Dutch Girl, which was up at First Avenue and 29th Street.
how about the iceman?
No,
I
Used to
don't
come around and
know.
deliver ice for your ice box.
I think we must have had electric refrigerator then, because I don't remember the Iceman coming.
As far back as I remember the Iceman when we went on our vacation up to the lake in Wisconsin. They had ice was delivered there, but down here we had a regular refrigerator by then.
Motion pictures. Did you girls go to the matinees? Were allowed to go to the matinees on Sunday afternoons
No,
downtown?
not on Sunday.
Saturday.
But on Saturday, I always went down to the Rialto and saw these cowboy movies. I went with my friends Dick and Charlie, and I don't think Allie went to she didn't care for the cowboy movies. But I can remember a lot going down there Saturday afternoon.
How did you get downtown?
I probably took the bus or the trolley. I imagine by that time it was a bus, unless my dad took me down. Mother didn't drive, and unless my dad took me down, I probably just took the bus.
Who was Dick and Charlie?
Oh, they were a couple of boys that lived over on Cottage Grove Avenue that I played with.
What was their names? Dick what?
Morrison. And I was quite a tomboy, so I was out playing baseball and football, and we made lead soldiers. They had an old shed at the back of their house. They lived on, there were 3 houses on Cottage Grove Avenue, close to what is now Forest Drive. And all that property behind our house had been owned by the Dows. And at one time, they had cows for their dairy over in there when we were much in the early years for us, which would have been in the 20s, early 30s. And they even had a kind of a milk house over there. It was a brick building where at one time they had stored milk or something, I guess. Anyway, we'd play baseball over there, and we'd use dried cow pies for our bases. They were dried. And then there were some really nice Scotch pine trees there. All of this is where Cottage Grove Place is now. No.
Yes.
No, it's where it's where Cottage Grove Place is now. And it was all pasture, and there were beautiful Scotch pine trees. One time we built a tree house up there.
Sit up in the pine trees with the wind blowing through the boughs.
And there was I remember there was very long grass there. The cows were long gone, but there was very tall grass, and you could lie down in the grass and be completely hidden. And then gradually it grew up into forest over the years, and it was like that until everything was bulldozed down to make room for buildings.
You know where that below Cottage Grove Place is before First Avenue? You know there's like a pond there, or would be? Well, that area has a natural drainage, and before anything was built up there, in the springtime, when the snow would melt, there was just like a regular torrent just running down the the field there, and then it would lodge about where that pond would be now, and then in the winter, if there was enough water in it and it got cold, it made a little ice skating place. I go over there and ice skate once in a while.
You had mentioned that one of your friends was Charlie. What was Charlie's last name?
Morrison.
Morrison. Did I ask you that? Yeah. And the other one?
Dick and Charlie.
They were brothers.
Oh, they were brothers. Oh,
We had a
excuse
younger
me.
sister, Ann,
Okay.
but she was
Okay.
a little younger than I was. I didn't play with
Yeah.
her.
Back to the Saturday matinees when Liz was going to the cowboy movies. What did you get to see any?
Well, I wasn't interested in cowboy movies. I don't really remember matinees. I remember practically once a week we went downtown and often ate downtown and went to a movie with our parents. And I remember Laurel and Hardy at what is now the State. I think it had a different name then. We loved that. But I don't remember particularly the matinees. Probably I went to them later on with my girlfriends when I was in high school.
Mother particularly liked Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. Dad didn't care too much for those, so she'd take Allie and me. The three of us would go to it'd be a matinee. It'd be about the 4:00 show after school was out.
Did either one of you have any memories of the community theater?
Not particularly. They did do some children's theater work, and I think there was a little theater at the YMCA. And it seems to me one time, I remember Alabama and the 40 Thieves, and I may have been in it. I don't know if I went to see it or if I was in it with just like an extra. I'm not sure about that. I don't know if Liz remembers that or not.
I don't remember that.
I was probably about in 5th grade at that time.
How about circuses when they'd come to town? Did you get to see any circuses?
Oh yes, we'd go see the circuses. At one time, they would have it out on off 27th Street and off Lyndale Avenue. Lyndale Avenue at that time, 29th Street didn't run through, and that was all a big field. And Lyndale Avenue was just gravel. But they would have the circuses once in a while would be out there. And then they usually parade through town for the parade to attract the children.
Up First Avenue?
From the 4th Street tracks, I presume. I remember sitting on the porch of our grandmother's old house down on 1st Avenue and 6th Street, and the whole family would be there. Our uncle and our parents probably, and Liz and me, and Mac. Our brother probably was not, but there would be a parade of circus animals up First Avenue. We always
The
watched
elephants would
that.
clomp by in tiger lions and tigers in cages and
I
carts.
imagine so.
What's interesting to me, I may be digressing, but I'm going to say this anyway, is the fact that in thinking over things, Allie and I have different memories. We don't all remember the same thing, and then sometimes she'll mention something, and then I'll remember it. But to begin with, I don't.
Yeah, same with me.
Do you recall any circuses out to Seymour, going out as far as Seymour?
No, I
and stuff?
don't.
Alice, you had mentioned eating downtown with your mother or with your folks. Was there any favorite places down there that?
I think we usually went to Bishop's, but there was also a cafeteria.
Harmony.
Harmony. And it was located where the on 3rd Street, where the First Star, whatever it is now, U.S. Corp, I guess it is now, parking ramp is.
Would this been on special occasions you'd do this, or?
No, I think we often did it one weeknight a week. It wasn't a special occasion.
During the Depression, Bishops would run what they called a blue plate special. And you'd get this one plate, and you could get I suppose, an entree and a vegetable and a salad or something with a certain price. And that was pretty much of a favorite during the Depression. People would go in there and get a good meal for a moderate price.
Back to the theaters. Do either of you remember when they had a bank night at
Oh, yes.
Paramount, maybe, or?
I remember it was a State, and my husband was the first one to win a prize. I think he won either $200 or $400.
Really?
He won the first one that they had.
Is this something you had to go down and stand there and be present to win?
Yes.
How about the Cherry Sisters? Do either one of you have any memories or heard
Well, we certainly heard about them. Never saw them before.
No.
They were out of show business by that time. But I do remember one time I was downtown in Killings with my mother. I maybe 12 years old or somewhere around there, and this old lady in rather strange, old-fashioned clothes went by. And Mother said, "That's one of the Cherry Sisters."
Grant Wood, if either of you have any memories of Grant?
Not personally, but Don, my husband's father, was in the class of 1910 at Washington High School, and he, Marvin Cohn and Grant Wood were in that same class, and the three of them became very good friends, and always they would get together. I know with Marvin and Winifred Cohn quite often, but they came out of high school. The three of them were very good friends, and they would do things together over in the old Berry house in the basement. And I think that Grant Wood gave the first painting he had to my husband's grandmother, because they would go over in that basement and do a lot of things. So that's a connection of the Berry family.
Do either of you have any memories of Howard and Margaret Hall?
Oh, yes.
Yes. She was a member of the White Cross Society, as were Allie and I, and we can remember having meetings at her house and getting to know her quite well. She was a very, very kind, wonderful
Yes.
woman.
Very lovely
Common
person.
lady, a very likable person.
Very much so.
Yeah.
I think when I was a tiny girl, I took dancing lessons, which was not my special talent, I can assure you. But I took dancing lessons from Edna Demon, and they had some kind of a Mayfete at Brucemore, and I was a tree or something like that, and I remember being there, and my mother took me there to perform, and as we were walking along, Mrs. Margaret Hall's mother, Mrs. Douglas, came along, and Mother did know her, and she introduced me to her. I remember that very vaguely.
About Art Collins, did either of you know Art when he was younger?
No, but I knew his second wife, Mary Meese, because her family lived in one of these three houses on Cottage Grove, and she would join us when all of us were out playing in the fields. And so I had known her since the time she was a little girl, but I didn't know Art.
I have a Ed Bruns down here, and I have a memory loss as to who this gentleman.
Mother had become acquainted with him, and he did. Well, you can tell more about that. But Mother bought some of his paintings. She liked his work very much.
Well, I believe he was superintendent of art in Cedar Rapids, and he was never as famous as Grant Wood, but he did very nice work, and he was well known around town. And I think Mother had portraits of her grandparents that her aunt had painted, and they were on canvas, and they were deteriorating. And I know after my parents moved into their newer house, Ed Bruns helped her restore those paintings and frame them.
You had mentioned the White Cross Society. I think that bears explanation as to what that was exactly.
It was an organization that was started in Grace Episcopal Church by these young women in a Sunday school class, and they decided that they wanted to help provide hospitalization for working women who couldn't afford it. And of course, in those days, it didn't cost very much for a day in the hospital, but a self-supporting working woman couldn't afford if she got sick and had to go to the hospital, she couldn't afford it. And the only members it went down from the original members to the daughters-in-law, and the granddaughters. And that's where Allie and I met Margaret Hall. And through the years, they have done so much good for providing care for women. A few years ago, we reached the point where there were not very many members. And we used to have a charity ball every Christmas time to raise money. And we had increased quite a large endowment. And we decided it was reaching the point where there was really no one to look after it. And so many of the daughters weren't living in Cedar Rapids anymore. So we gave the endowment to the Greater Cedar Rapids Foundation, and then they invest the money, and then they use the interest, the income that comes from our endowment, to provide hospitalization, and then they've been going into helping in different areas of children too, mostly in the medical field.
Good. Let's talk a little bit about your folks. Was your dad a fun type person, or was he so busy trying to earn a living that did he get to spend a lot of time with you children?
He was very busy, but he also was fun, and yes, he spent a lot of time with us. We played a lot of games, and we were all great readers, and we took trips, and we had this cabin up in Wisconsin, and we did that, and yes, he was fun.
You would say in the early days, you said in the early days he had a clothing store.
It was called M.M. Thompson Haberdashery, and it had fine men's clothing.
He came from Wisconsin to, he came to Cedar Rapids on a weekend because he'd been told there were opportunities down here for a men's store. And while he was here, he decided there were, and he rented space and made arrangements to open the store, and went back and closed out his affairs in Wisconsin and moved down here. And he and Mother didn't meet till, at least 10 years after that. And he had the clothing store here in Cedar Rapids, M.M. Thompson Haberdasher, I think it was called, and two different locations on 3rd Street. And he went out of business shortly before I was born, and I think Liz was just a baby. So we just don't remember the retail store.
For the younger generation, what is a haberdashery?
It's just men's clothing, I believe, and I think it's sort of a fine, really nice men's clothing.
Did he dress the part?
Yes, he was a very good dresser. Yes.
Here's a picture of him taken by one of those roving photographers that they used to have downtown. You know, they'd give you a slip, and if you wanted the picture, I guess you would mail it in with the money, and you'd get the picture. And he was a brisk walker and a snappy dresser, and very erect, and he was quite an athlete in his youth. And I like this picture.
The winter activities. What was there to do for a couple of young girls in Cedar Rapids? Did you skate?
Well,
sled?
there was ice skating. They always sledded. They had a big rink over at Arthur's School, and then also I would go down to Indian Creek and skate. We'd find areas where it was quiet. If there were rushing water, you couldn't skate there, but there'd be areas where it was the water was still. And between the Indian Creek and the Arthur, there was a lot of good ice skating in the winter. And then we had a hill by our house that when we had sleds, and we would slide down the hill, so we didn't have to go anywhere to get a good place to do sledding.
Did you ever have the opportunity to go for a sleigh ride?
No, I never did.
I didn't either.
How about in the summertime before air conditioning? Do you have memories of it being very hot in your house? Or?
Oh, yes. Mother would close up the house in the morning to keep the cooler air in. And then we have memories of, on the hot nights, we had these pine trees. There's a little hill up from the house, and these tall pines. And we all go out, and we'd lie on the grass, and it was kind of cool out there. And we'd lie on the grass and look at the stars and just talk.
And fond memories.
Oh, yes.
Holidays. Any of them stick out in your mind? Memorial Day. Did family do anything special on Memorial Day?
We always took flowers.
Yes, Mother always, she had a bouquet of flowers for every member of her family at Oak Hill Cemetery. And she always had to get out there early because they closed the gates, and I can't remember if it was 9 or 10 o'clock. And then there would be apparently the American Legion had a parade through there, but we had to get the bouquets out before the gates were
early.
closed.
4th of July. Any fond memories about 4th of July?
We had at our house, we had what was known as a porte cochere. It's where you drive in and you'd be undercover to get out to go onto the porch. And so didn't matter whether it was rain or sunny day, because we could stand on the porch and toss the firecrackers out under the porte cochere. we always did that.
And then we always had pinwheels and things in the evening as it was getting dark. And I believe our father usually set them off, and I believe it was out near First Avenue.
Did they ever take you downtown for any of the 4th of July parades or
I don't recall
No.
having them then.
No.
Thanksgiving? Was that a special day?
Oh
in
yes,
the,
Thanksgiving and Christmas, our uncle and grandmother always came out for dinners with us.
was your mom a good cook?
Oh yeah.
Yes,
remember.
excellent.
May baskets. Did the girls
Oh,
do
yes.
May baskets?
We collected them, collected flowers and candies, and distributed them to friends.
Valentine's Day.
Oh yes, I think one of our memories of Valentine's Day is that we both got the measles about the same time. So we were at home on Valentine's Day, and I remember Mother going down. She'd go downtown. She'd come in with a bunch of Valentines for us. It was very convenient to have the measles together because neither one of us was too sick, and we could entertain each other.
We got it. She got the measles out of the way at one fell swoop.
Halloween.
Oh yes.
And over at Arthur, all the kids came dressed in their Halloween costumes, and they had a parade around.
Back then, they had the night before Halloween. They had doorbell night, and the kids would go out and ring doorbells. And then the idea was, when the people opened the door, you threw in kernels of corn or something, something to be obnoxious. And then Halloween, it wasn't so much trick or treat as it is now. You didn't expect to get candy every place, but I think they did more soaping of windows and that sort of thing.
Did you hear of any pranks in the neighborhood, like people tipping over the outhouses or?
Well, we heard about it, but not in our neighborhood.
Christmases. Any fond memories of any special Christmases?
They were all good.
I can remember one time when Allie and I were very young, we got up about 4 o'clock and we came out to see what was, at least I did, I don't know, I came out to see what Santa had left us, and Mother and Dad were there. They were just getting ready to go to bed. And they had to assure me that yes, he'd been there. They'd just been checking on things, and I should get back to bed.
Do you have any to stick out in your mind, Alice?
I think the one I remember, I mean, they're all sort of, it's a general memory, but I do remember I got a big dollhouse, which was almost as long as this coffee table, and I don't know how old I was, but 6, 7, 8, probably about 7. Anyway, my mother had a carpenter make it, and I was thrilled with it. And my brother, of course, who was 10 years older, said, yes, Santa Claus made so much noise getting that down the chimney that the neighbors complained. And I thought that was a little fishy. So that was the first time I doubted Santa Claus.
Was your grandparents, were they living?
Our mother's mother, lived here in Cedar Rapids, and we knew her well. Our father's mother lived in the state of Washington, in Everett, Washington, and I think she came to visit once when I was about a year old, but we have no memories of her. Mm-hmm. And both of our grandfathers were gone before our parents even were married.
Did your mother always have a big Christmas dinner?
Oh yes,
Mm-hmm.
oh yes. And our grandmother brought suet pudding. She always had these little tin cans. Now you would call it more like a plum pudding, I suppose, but she called it suet pudding, and brought this delicious dip, which was, of course, practically all butter and sugar, and I think I ate the pudding for the dip.
Shopping trips downtown, do you remember any?
Well, Mother used to take us with her. At least I remember being downtown with her. I remember being in Martin's. I think at that time on the 3rd floor they had drapery materials or upholstery materials, and of course later on they didn't have anything like that. And we used to go to, occasionally we would go to Killian's tea room with her, and it was on the third or 4th floor, probably the 3rd floor in the Killian's building. And I remember they had red lacquered tables and chairs, and I think we didn't eat lunch there so much, but we would go up for Sundays and that sort of thing.
When we went shopping, it was usually Killian's or Kramer's or Martin's or Newman's, Armstrongs at that time, earlier, didn't carry women's clothes, or I don't think that they carried children's. They carried mostly men's, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But in later years, then, when I was getting clothes for my boys, they had enlarged the amount of clothing they had.
Do you remember Christmases downtown? The store is all
Oh
decorated.
yes, they
and
all.
A lot of people in the streets, and
Oh yeah, it was busy then
Yeah.
downtown.
everything was so festive. And,
Mm-hmm.
did your mother drive?
No.
She told us, of course we didn't know it before she was married, she had an electric car, and she drove that. But she never drove the other, and so Dad would take us to school sometimes on a rainy day. Usually we walked.
Did you have any memories of the Paramount Theater?
Yes, although it seems to me most of the movies we went to were at the Iowa Theater. At least that's where Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire were, and Laurel and Hardy were at the what is now was called the State later. And I'm sure we went to the Paramount Theater too, but I don't remember it as vividly when I was a little girl.
Do you
Later
remember?
on I do.
Do you remember any of the other theaters at that time? That
Well, there was the Rialto and the Palace. I think the Palace was on 2nd Avenue, and the Rialto was on 1st Avenue. And then there was a Times Theater up on 1st Avenue near 14th Street.
That was built
But
a
that
little
was later. That was later.
I do remember that the Palace on Saturday night often had 4 separate feature films. This was when I was in high school. And I did know people who went and sat through 4 films, but I never did it.
Well, when you went to the movies, so often they had the main attraction, and then they always had a B movie, which was not as considered as good, but you'd sit there, you'd see 2 movies for the price of one.
And the admission was, I believe, about a dime when we were children, and I think it went up to 25 cents for adults, or anyone over 12.
you had mentioned the fact that your dad had to give up his clothing store because of
Yes.
a bank.
Well, first there was he had a couple of fires. He would have started. He came down here in 1900, so he would have started the store soon after that. And in that 25 years, he had a couple of fires, and then he lost his lease, as I understand it. And the bank wanted to take over that corner. And at that point, having had the fire, he just couldn't start up another company.
Would that have been during the Depression? Would that have had anything
No.
to do with it?
No, it was before. The bank wanted to build the building, the 12-story building, which is still there.
So what did your dad do then?
He went into insurance.
In,
He sold
then he spent
insurance.
the rest of his life in insurance.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Did your mother have a maid?
Yes. In those days, so many did, and many of the maids came from outside Cedar Rapids, from the farms, because that was about the best job for any of these young women to get. And Mother had a series. The last one she had was there about 8 years, I think,
Helen.
Helen. And she was wonderful.
She stayed until she was married, and we saw in the paper, she and her husband celebrated their, 60th, 50th?
Well, they would have been married in 1940.
So celebrated their 60th wedding anniversary a couple of years ago.
What was their last name?
Their name now is Kopetsky.
Her maiden name was Petrozelka. And they would get room and board, and they would get Thursday afternoon off and Sunday afternoon off. I guess that's why we often went downtown Thursday and had an early dinner and went to a movie.
Did she spoil you girls as
No.
far as
I don't
making
think she spoiled us,
special
but she
things,
was
cookies? And
Very nice to us.
Yeah.
And a good cook.
did your mother garden? Have a big garden?
Just flowers. She specialized in zinnias, as I recall.
So, with your mother having a housekeeper, that probably give her the chance to spend a lot of time with you
Yes,
children.
and she went down she would take the bus downtown 2 miles down to 6th Street and spend time with her mother also, who was, of course, getting older and failing.
Sunday activities. Was your church, or folks church-going people? That
Yes.
and Sunday was a special day that no work and
Dad saw that we got to church or Sunday school, and as a family we went often. And then in the afternoon we usually had a Sunday dinner, and then in the afternoon, if the weather wasn't so good, we'd all be sitting around reading. We were a great family to read. Or we didn't go to movies on Sunday, and
We often had whole family would go for a ride around Cedar Rapids.
was a roast beef dinner.
Could be. Or fried
Common.
chicken.
and
Delicious.
a special treat was ice cream. It's not like now when you can get ice cream all the time. It was kind of a special treat for a Sunday dinner to have ice cream.
Do you ever recall your dad driving out to the Seedling Mile, that 1 mile of pavement
No, I
between
don't.
Mount Vernon and...
He probably had. I remember them telling about going to the football game in Iowa City and the roads being so terrible coming home. And I guess that's when they paved the road between Cedar Rapids and Iowa City after one horrible Saturday afternoon.
How about berry picking? Did you ever
No,
go
I do
berry
more of
picking?
it now because I grow my own raspberries, but we didn't go berry picking then.
McLeod Springs?
There was a wonderful spring at what is now 42nd Street and Center Point Road. And my recollection is there was no building out there at that time. The houses stopped at, probably didn't go beyond 32nd Street at that time. And there was a spring just north of Center Point Road, and it ran under the road. There must have been a little bridge over it. And there was kind of a pond there, and then the water ran on and was McLeod Run, ran into Cedar Lake. But the spring water was so pure and fresh there, and I remember watercress grew there also. It was really a lovely spot. And someone bottled the McLeod spring water, and it would be delivered. A very large bottle would be delivered once a week, and to whoever ordered it. And our father always wanted to have the spring water, so we would have wonderful water. And of course, unfortunately, McLeod Springs is gone now.
Back in those days, I think they always used spring water to put in their batteries, car batteries. That they,
Oh, really?
yeah,
I didn't know that.
because it was more
Pure.
free of chemicals, pure. How about nutting in the fall of the year? Did your dad ever
yes.
take you nutting?
We did that. We had this, this property that now is Fox Heritage Woods out that belongs in Marion, and there were a lot of butternut trees there and some walnut trees. And in the fall, we'd go out there and to get the nuts. And then, of course, in the spring, we'd go out to see the wildflowers.
Any memories of the blizzard of 35 and 36?
Those were horribly cold winters, and we had ice storms, as I recall, and you could ice skate to school. I can't even imagine what it was like now because I don't recall anything since then that was that bad. You probably have more memories than I do, Liz.
We had one, I don't know if it was the winter of 35 or 36, but we had one winter where we had about 4 inches of snow on the ground, and then we got freezing rain. And it froze on top of the snow, and it must have been awful for the people trying to get anywhere. But it was fun for the kids. The school was closed, and we had about 10 days when we could ice skate on the snow. We could ice skate every place we wanted to go. And I've often thought afterwards how awful it must have been of those trying to get to work. But the kids had a wonderful time.
You mentioned the fact that you lived on First Avenue and you had a big yard.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine that was kind of like country, living in the country.
Yes, it was.
And the girls, you and the kids in the neighborhood, they would be playing. They'd probably disappear. They'd be gone all day long playing out in the timber. And
Oh, I'd be playing out. Well, the land ran back from First Avenue to where Forest Drive is now, and I'd be playing way back in the land. And it'd come lunchtime, and mother or the maid we had a great big bell, and she'd stand outside the kitchen door and ring that bell, and I could hear it away, and then I'd know it was lunchtime and know to get home.
I take it that you were very kind of like a tomboy.
Yes.
You
yes.
enjoyed the outdoors and probably played football, climbed trees, and
I did all that. Mhm.
Did you ever have to beat up a neighborhood boy, or?
No, but one time I came home, I had a nosebleed, and mother, who was very feminine, a lady, said to me, "Elizabeth, how did you get that nosebleed?" And I said, "Well, I was wrestling with Bud, and he hit me in the nose with his elbow." Well, Bud was about 6 feet tall, and why in the world I was wrestling with him, I have no idea. But I came in with this nosebleed. Mother's a little bit perturbed.
Alice, you were not
I-
a outdoor girl.
Not really. I like to climb trees too. I remember doing that, and of course, I loved to swim when we went to the lake in the summer. But I kind of like to play with dolls. I like to play imagination with them and have them do different things. And I like paper dolls and that sort of thing.
Well, we have had a story about, I would say to, Allie'd want me to play dolls with her, and I would say, you play game with me for half an hour, and then I'll play dolls with you for half an hour. And then what did I do, Ellie?
My recollection is that after we got through playing with what she wanted to play, I'd say, "Well, now let's go and do whatever I wanted to." And she'd say, "Well, I think I'll go out and see if the Morrison boys want to play baseball." See, she was older than I was and had the upper hand usually.
Oh, I think I played a little bit with you, Allie.
Do you have any memories of the Depression? Any that stuck with you? Did they affect your dad or any of
Well,
your...
I was thinking about that, and I don't recall any of my friends whose fathers lost their jobs. But I do remember there was not much cash around. And as I say, we would have a nickel and go and get the ice cream cup. Our family never suffered. We were lucky. But nobody had lots of cash. And I did have a friend who lived in Cedar Rapids at the time, although I didn't know her till we were in high school, and her father did lose his job. And she said that the family for a year or two lived in Bedford, Iowa. Her father was with the CCC, and the family had a little apartment above a store there and lived on beans mostly. Pardon me. And he was gone all week with the CCC and would only be with his family on weekends. And that really marked her, I would say. She would refer to it often. But I can't think of any of my friends that I played with in grade school who were affected that much.
I had a friend whose father was a doctor, and we'd be out playing, and she'd say, "We're going to have roast chicken tonight." It seemed like one of her dad's patients was in trying to pay his bill, brought him a chicken. And they, from the way she would talk, they quite often, her father was paid in produce from people that were growing things and couldn't pay otherwise.
Do you have any memories of segregation in Cedar Rapids?
No.
There were no minorities in school at Arthur that I can recall, and or really at Franklin.
Okay, let's get into high school. Where did you girls go to high school?
Franklin.
Franklin High School.
Both of us.
And this is the two of you in high school?
I think so. I would say that I was in high school by that time. Allie may have been in junior high. And this is a picture taken in our library. You can see how many books lined the shelves.
Mm-hmm. Very nice. At that time when you were going to high school, how many people or how many students were in the class, in a class?
At that time they had what was it, A and B? They had a January class and a June class, so they were divided. And I was in a June class, and I think there were just about 125 in my class. And Liz was in a January graduating class.
I think we probably had about 100.
Were either one of you into sports?
No.
No, there weren't the girls' teams then that they have now. We had phys ed, and you had different things, but no teams.
How about music, either one of you?
Unfortunately,
Well,
not.
no. Mother tried with me quite different interests, instruments, but I'm not musical.
I do remember that I took piano lessons, and I always mothers take their children every place now, drive them. But I went a mile and a half. It was over on Beaver Avenue, I believe, and I always rode my bike to my music lesson. Nobody took me, drove me there. I always rode my bike.
Any plays that you remember being in?
I was in the senior play when I graduated from Franklin. I played the innkeeper's wife. It was fun.
I was also in the senior class play, not a big part though.
How about your proms? Were they special events for either one of you?
No.
They were played down at Franklin during that time.
Well, my class couldn't have a dance. Some of the classes did, but there were several boys in my class that didn't behave too well, and so the authorities said that we could have a dinner, but we couldn't have a dance. So we all went to the dinner, and then afterwards, most of us ended up at a place like the Yacht Club where you danced to a jukebox, or there was a place in Marion. So our class ended up different places, everybody going out to dance afterwards, but it wasn't a school activity.
Where in Marion?
I was trying to think. There was a place on the corner of, I can't remember now, at the corner of, I think it's 10th Street and 7th Avenue, but I don't know what the name was. I most always went to the Yacht Club when I went out to any place for dancing in high school.
You mentioned it was played down at your school, Alice.
Yes, academics were stressed in Franklin at that time. Our principal was Malcolm Hallman, and he was very much for academics. And I think we had my senior class had a dinner also, but I don't recall any dancing. There was occasionally a dance, but it wasn't a big deal like it is now.
Speaking of dances, later years when you got a little bit older, do you remember going to any dance halls in Cedar Rapids?
Well, there was a pavilion, Thornwood Pavilion, out along near the Cedar River in the southwest part of town. And that was a fun place to go in the summer because it was kind of open air. And then they had a dance out at Armar.
Yes. Very nice dance
And then
hall.
there was Danceland downtown. I didn't particularly go to Danceland. I went more to these other places on the outskirts.
Did you have dates when you went to these dances?
Yes.
Also, when I got through school, the Lighthouse was a very popular place to go to, and at that time it wasn't all dining. They had an open area
For
in
a
the
dance
center
floor.
of the main room, and they had a jukebox. And if you went to a movie with someone, you would often end up there for something to eat and a little dancing.
This was the Lighthouse out on Mount Vernon Road.
Yes.
Elizabeth, you had mentioned the Yacht Club. Was this down on Ellis?
Yes. I think it's near where the eating place is. I don't know what the name of it is now, but it was right near there. And you were right. Yes, it was right on the river. And they had, in the center was the dance floor, and then they had booths all the way around. And I don't think they served particularly dinners, but I'm sure they had sandwiches, things like that. It was a very popular place for the high school kids to go to.
Was this something that your folks had to be a member of in order for you to go there?
No,
Okay.
it was just called the Yacht Club, but anybody could go to it.
And back in those days, of course, there wasn't any liquor by the drink.
No.
How about medical illnesses in your family? Any broken bones or any serious injuries?
No, but I did. I got scarlet fever just shortly before Allie was to be born. So Mother and Dad moved down to my grandmother's house, and she came out to stay with me because we were quarantined. And you know, in those days, if you had anything like scarlet fever or any of the diseases like that, they'd come out and put a big sign on your door saying that it was quarantined, so nobody would go in. But nobody else in the family got it, and I evidently must have had a light case because I had I wasn't bothered with anything afterwards.
Okay, so you girls graduated from high school. We'll take you first, Elizabeth. You graduated from high school in what year?
January 1939.
Did you at that time have any idea in your mind what you may like to do with your life?
No,
or
I
didn't
know.
Were girls career orientated then?
Well, they weren't as much. I didn't know. I knew I wanted to go to college, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I I stayed on since I graduated in January. I stayed on and took shorthand and typing, and because of that, then I worked for a teacher, and I worked for Geraldine Green, who was a teacher of dramatics and also taught some English classes. And she had me grading, reading the themes that her students wrote and grading them, and then she'd go over to make sure she checked with what I had written out, and then I helped her with the plays, and that was fun. Dad had had a heart attack in January and wasn't able to come to my graduation. Since Mother didn't drive, and my uncle had arthritis, he had come up from Arizona because our grandmother was ill, and he couldn't drive, and my brother didn't drive at that time, and Allie didn't drive. So I was the designated driver for everybody that winter. And I did have time since I was through high school. So I always remember that.
So where did you end up going to college then?
I went my first year to Lindenwood College in St. Charles, Missouri, and I enjoyed it, but I had always sort of wanted to go to Carleton. And so we stopped on our way up to our cabin in the summer of 40. We stopped to look at Carleton, and I talked to the admissions, and I really loved it, and they would take me in as a transfer student. So I had my 3 years there at Carleton.
Where did you learn about Carleton? This is in what city?
It's in Northfield, Minnesota. I think that I probably learned about it because Carleton played at that time in the Midwest Conference. They played football and basketball, and I'd go to some of the football games. And I got the name there. I liked the name, and then when we stopped and I saw the campus, I really liked it. So I went there, and I ended up majoring in botany.
They have a Jesse James Museum in Northfield.
Yes, they do.
How did you get to and from Northfield from Cedar Rapids?
The train. It ran through from, it would leave Cedar Rapids about 11 or 12 at night and get there about 6 in the morning. And then coming home would leave about 6 at night and get in late in the evening here, 11 or 12.
Did you major in anything? Did you have any plans at that time?
I majored
then?
in botany. I didn't have any plans, but after I got out of college, I was at home that summer, and a good friend had gone to Midland, Michigan to work for Dow Chemical Company. She had majored in chemistry. And she wrote me and said that they had a greenhouse, and why didn't I apply and see if I could get a job there? So I did, and I got a job. I had a very fancy title for what I did. I was the assistant plant pathologist. We were testing new fungicides, and I was in charge of running the tests. I worked there from September till the following, about a year. And then I had decided to go into the waves. This was, of course, during the war. I graduated from college in 43, and so then in the summer of 44, or fall of 44, I came home and waiting to get my orders to go in the waves, and I got the letter saying that they were closing down the Officers Candidate School, but I could enlist at that time. By that time, I was working for the Red Cross in their home service department here in Cedar Rapids and taking flying lessons. And so I decided that I wouldn't enlist. So I stayed here.
Did you take flying lessons out to
Hunter Airfield,
Hunter
yes.
Airport?
Yes.
And
I took them until in 1945, in April, when Don Berry came home. He was being transferred from one airfield to another and had 10 days here, and we dated, and we became engaged, and I had gone through all my money, so I quit taking flying lessons.
Who was your instructor?
Oscar Anderson.
In going to school in Northfield, Minnesota, do you recall the blizzard of 1940, the Armistice
yes.
Day blizzard?
Since I'd come in as a transfer, and I didn't come in until August, I was in an off-campus house. And I remember the blizzard started in the morning, and by night we had to go over across campus probably about 3 or 4 blocks to get to the dorm where we'd have our dinner. And we had an excellent resident head living in our house, and she started us out. We were all dressed warmly, and we all had to, it was just really a terrible blizzard. We walked, we held hands the whole way. It was a trail, but holding hands all the way across, and we got over there for dinner, and then, of course, after dinner we did the same thing to get back to the house. But the town of Northfield was sealed off for 3 days. Nothing going in or out. I don't know whether phone lines, I doubt if you could even call, but there wasn't anything going in or out for 3 days.
What year did you graduate from Northfield?
1943.
And what was your first job after college?
Well, the job over in Midland, Michigan for Dow
Okay.
Chemical Company.
Did you have a car yet?
No.
When, at this time period, was there quite a few jobs available for girls?
I think so. My only problem wasn't getting the job, it was finding a place to live. I was never able to find an apartment. I had a room the whole time I was there, just a room. And so I had to eat out my night meal every night. I'd have to walk downtown. I had no car. But I enjoyed the work, and I enjoyed the people I worked with, and I was working in a greenhouse.
Did you ever cut or dissect any frogs?
Yeah.
I did in my zoology class.
You didn't when you were a young girl.
No, no.
I'm surprised you didn't. Alice,
Yes.
and you decided to go to Carleton too.
Yes. Well, I knew that my sister liked it, and I didn't really know where I wanted to go because I didn't know what I wanted to do, what I wanted to major in. And I visited her in the winter one weekend, and while I was up there, I applied and was accepted, and so I went to Carleton 4 years.
Did you major in anything, or
Well, yes. My freshman year, I took a history course from a marvelous teacher, and I had always liked history, and I was hooked after that, so I majored in history.
and you rode back and forth in the train the same way?
Yes. Liz didn't mention, but the train, it was the Rock Island Rocket that ran from St. Louis to Minneapolis, and it really was a wonderful way to get back and forth. And I used to take it. I remember there were 6 of us from Cedar Rapids my freshman year. We were down there. I think the train left here about 1 o'clock in the morning. And it was in the middle of September, and it was one of those fall evenings when we probably had a first frost that night. It was cold. And the 6 of us, 3 boys and 3 girls, got on the train. And none of us were close friends, but we knew each other. And got off about 20 of 7, I guess, in the morning, and went up the hill and to the campus, and found where we were supposed to live, and maybe enrolled in our classes that same day. I don't know.
Did you recall the Armistice Day blizzard or any other storms that?
I wasn't there at the time of the famous blizzard. I think maybe down here, it seems to me at that time I had gone with some girlfriends to a movie, and there was no Thompson Drive at that time. There was Cottage Grove and then 23rd Street Drive. And I think we got off the bus at 23rd Street Drive and walked to the home of one of the girls we had been invited to have supper there. And as I recall, we had a terrible time getting from the First Avenue and 23rd Street to about 2 or 3 blocks to where this girl lived. And I don't know how I got home, but it was rugged.
Did you? In what year did you graduate in?
1946.
1946. What did you have in mind that you wanted to do with your life? Did you have any idea?
Well, it seemed as though most of the girls in my class were either taking teaching courses, and they had to write a paper every week, and I didn't want to do that, so I didn't take the teaching course. Either that, or they all went to secretarial school and got secretarial jobs. It seems as though the 90% of them, and some of them got married almost immediately. That was during the period when everybody was getting married and having big families. And the only immediate thing I knew I wanted to do was to, spend some time in New York City. I'd been there once, and I wanted to work there and live there for a while, and I had a college friend who wanted to do the same thing. Well, we didn't get there for a year, so the first year after school I basically mostly had fun. And then we went to New York, and I spent 6 months there. We both got jobs with the Rockefeller Foundation doing mostly clerical work. Mm-hmm. And that was extremely interesting, and we saw everything we could in New York during the 6 months. Well, I came home after that, and she stayed on. And then I just had didn't have any major job for a while. Then I went back to New York, and I worked for a magazine the second time I went back, and I was there 2.5 years.
What magazine was that?
Ladies' Home Journal. And
What was your job with the journal?
well, I suppose you'd say it was secretarial, except that on a magazine you do anything they want you to, including going out shopping for props for pictures and so on. And that was always, a break in the routine. That was fun. And I was just getting a little ambition about it when my father had a stroke, and I came home, and he still had his insurance office. So and he was never able to go back. So I ran that for a year until it was sold. And then,
What was the name of the insurance, his office?
I think it was just M. Thompson Insurance. Wasn't it?
I think so.
And that was, also interesting. But I didn't want to go and stay in the insurance business. And I also worked part-time for a travel agency. But I would say basically for a few years I sort of helped out, the family. Daddy had to have help all the time. And so that was a period when I did that.
Okay. December 7th, 1941. Liz, do you have any memories of...
Yes, I had come home. My grandmother's funeral was on December 5th, on Friday, and I had come home and for her funeral, and then I had come home from Carleton. And then on the Sunday, we were having dinner, and the phone rang, and my brother was called to the phone. He was the telegraph editor at the Gazette Company, and he was called to the phone, and we all heard him say, "The hell they did!" And we thought, well, what in the world has happened? And he came back to the dinner table, and he said, "The Japs have just bombed Pearl Harbor, and I've got to get out an extra." And so then, in those days, they did the extra more than they do now. And so he had to get out and go to work. And that's the way that our family learned about the Japs bombing Pearl Harbor.
You mentioned you had a memory of D-Day.
Yes, it was in June, and I was asleep in my room, and the window was open a little bit so that I could hear traffic noise from First Avenue. And I was awakened about 6 o'clock in the morning, and the Gazette had a car with a loudspeaker going all around town, and they were blaring out, "D-Day is here, D-Day is here." And I believe Liz was in Midland at that time, so she doesn't remember it. But, of course, everybody got out of bed right away and probably rushed to the radio. We didn't have TV to
Do you know
hear
if
about
large crowds gathered downtown to celebrate that?
At the end of the war, they did.
Yeah.
I was in Northfield at the time the war ended in Europe, and there weren't any large crowds in Northfield. But I was in Cedar Rapids, what did they call it? VJD, I guess it was. And everybody was all over downtown. All over downtown.
Liz, when did you get married? What year did you get
I
married?
got married in 1946. Don came back from service. We were engaged in 1945, and then he went to serve in the Air Corps on the island of Tinian. He was a flight engineer on B-29s. And then he came back in April of 46, and we were married in May of 46. And then lived here in Cedar Rapids. First, he started to work for H.R. Green. He was a civil engineer. Then he decided he didn't really think he wanted to do that, and he had an opportunity to buy a lot over on Ellis Boulevard that a man had just put in the cement, the foundation, and he decided he didn't want to build the house anymore. Well, Don's father was working for the Hawkeye Lumber, or was part owner of the Hawkeye Lumber Company, and he'd drawn up the plans for this house, and he got Don kind of interested, so we put the little money that we had from wedding presents in and bought that lot, and then he started in the house building. And then after that one was built and sold, we got some land over on the northeast part of town, around Franklin Avenue and Lindale Avenue and 27th Street. And then he went into the house building business. And then I became his bookkeeper. And since I didn't know anything about it, we had the CPA set up our books for us, and I knew one side was the debits and one the credits, and that's about all I knew. So I decided once we had two boys, once they got into school, I decided to go to Co and take accounting courses. So I liked it so much, I took all the accounting courses that I could get. And then in later years, I found out I could get a second degree from Co if I took a semester of economics and a year of economics and a semester of statistics. So in 1984, I got a second degree from Co College with a major in business administration. So all the years that Don was in business, we had the two boys and looking after them and helping look after the parents and doing the bookwork.
You have a lovely family picture there. I'd like to have you show. When was this picture taken?
I would think it would be taken about in 1984. By that time, Don and Roxy were back from their 7 years in Turkey, and they have Ivan and Heather were both born in Turkey, and then Kezi was born in the United States. And they live now in Massachusetts. Don is a teacher at Phillips Academy in Andover, Massachusetts. He teaches mathematics. Ivan now is 26 and he's through college and he's going to start going to graduate school in international relations. Heather's 24, she's through college and she's going to, she's looking for a job. I don't know where she's going. Kezi's going to graduate this spring from Phillips Academy and then she's going to Georgetown. Ivan went to Georgetown and Heather went to Goucher, which is in Baltimore. So now all the, Ivan now will be going to Johns Hopkins School of International Studies. So the whole family will be down there in the Washington, D.C. area. Don married Roxanne Scott in 1971. And then they went to Turkey for 7 years and were teaching missionaries. Don went to Carleton, the same school I'd gone to, and he met Roxy there. And then they were married in 71. And Don had after college, he graduated in 1970. He went to Yale Divinity School, and he has a Master of Divinity degree, but he's a mathematics teacher. He didn't want to be ordained. And Roxy has a Master of Education degree from Goucher. And they've had a good life together. My second son is Steve. He was born in 1952, just had his 50th birthday, and he was married 6 years ago to Nancy. And they have no children, but they have a dog, Checkers. And I think Checkers is keeping them as busy as if they had children.
How long have you and your husband married?
We were married in 1946, and then he died in 1991. So we'd been married almost 45 years.
Mm-hmm. Very nice. Alice, what year did you get married?
I was married in August 27th, 1970, to Howard Smith, who was an attorney in Cedar Rapids. And we didn't have any children together, but he had been married before, and he had 2 children, my stepchildren that I'm very fond of. Quite close to, I would say.
Go ahead.
This is a picture of Howard and me on our wedding day. My mother was in a wheelchair by then, and she had people helping her. And so the wedding was, we were married in front of her fireplace in the living room where I live now. And the small reception was in the dining room. This is a picture of Howard's daughter, Leslie, and her family. Leslie is on the left here, and her husband, Kevin Sand, is here. Kevin is a doctor in Decorah, Iowa, comes of Norwegian descent, and Leslie is a physical therapist. And their 2 children are Jenny, who is graduating from St. Olaf this spring, and she has been accepted at, I believe it's Arizona State in Tempe, Arizona. She's going to work for a doctorate in psychology. And the son, Rob, is finishing his freshman year at Brown University, and I'm not just sure what he's going to major in yet. Haven't heard. And then Howard's, here's a picture of Howard's son Warren and his family. He's an attorney in Dallas, Texas, and his wife Karen is really an artist, although she's at home now. She isn't working right now. And they have 2 daughters, Madeline and Ivy.
How long were you and your husband married?
We were married 19 and a half years to the day. He died of leukemia on February 27th, 1990. And that, if he had lived 6 more months, we would have been married 20 years.
But one thing I wanted to mention, Don and I were married on May 25th, 1946, and Steve and Nancy were married on May 25th, 1996. They picked the date that would have been down on my 50th wedding anniversary. Steve said, "Is that okay, Mom?" And I said, "Oh, that's wonderful."
We passed this picture up front. This is a picture of your folks.
Yes.
That approximately what year would have that have been taken?
I think about 1963,
Probably, or 60.
long in there.
Liz, if you had your life to live over again, is there anything you wished you would have accomplished or could have accomplished?
There's one thing, I think I might have gotten a CPA. I really like the field of accounting, and I would like to have done that, but at the time I had a young family. I was doing Don's bookwork. The parents weren't too well, and I just felt that I had just too much. At that time, I couldn't just sit for the test. I would have had to work a year, and I just didn't feel that I had the time to do all that. It's not that important, but that's one thing I think I would have kind of liked. Other than that, Don and I had a very happy life together. We raised 2 fine boys, and I don't regret the time looking after my parents at all. And I don't think of anything.
Very good. Alice, how about you? If you had your life to live over again?
Probably. Well, I don't know as far as career, that sort of thing. There are a few things maybe I would have liked to have been able to write poetry, I think, which I never could. But I think mainly, I think it would have been nice if Howard and I could have gotten married a little younger, to have more years together, and maybe had a couple of children of our own. I think probably that would have been the icing on the cake.
Did you happen to be a bridesmaid for your sister's wedding?
Yes, I was a bridesmaid. Don's sister was the other one, and I left my studies at Carleton to come down to the wedding. Somehow we got the dress made, the bridesmaid's dress. But I came down, and I guess I had a final fitting on the dress on Thursday. The wedding was on Saturday, and I was supposed to go back to my final exams the next week. I was graduating that year. It was 1946, and there were floods in northern Iowa at the time, and the rocket, it was delayed about 6 hours. I think I left about 7 o'clock in the morning instead of at 1 o'clock at night. And we had detoured in northern Iowa to avoid the flooded areas. But I did get back, and I had all my exams the next week. And then I was there a few days, and then I had my graduation. And Liz and Don interrupted their honeymoon to come and attend it. I heard about that later. But and my parents, they had not been able to get a new car during the war, and they had a terrible time getting there. The car broke down on the way, and I don't know how they got from, I believe it was Austin, Minnesota to Northfield, and or how we got home. I just can't remember, but I know a week later my father and I took the interurban to Waterloo, and then a bus, I guess, to Austin, I believe the car was in Charles City by that time, picked up the car in Charles City and drove it home. And of course, they had just begun producing automobiles at that time.
Liz, you live on Thompson Drive. How did the street become named?
Well, Dad had this property. We lived on a house on First Avenue, but he had about 10 acres here, and it ran from First Avenue to what is now Forest Drive, and bordered by Thompson Drive on one side and the Dow's Fields on the other side. Well, when they decided that they were going to build Washington High School where they did, they had to put in the street from Cottage Grove to 23rd Street Drive, which became an addition of Forest Drive. And then from 23rd Street Drive on, the same street is called 2nd Avenue, because that's what it had been earlier. Well, then they had to have a street from 1st Avenue to Forest Drive so that people could get to Washington High School. And they needed land from Dad, and then land from the Mitvoskis, who owned the property on the other side of the fence, because there was just a fence between the two properties. So Dad gave half of the street, and the Mitvoskis gave the other half, and then the city named it Thompson Drive. And at first we thought that there would be just the few lots that were platted on either side of Thompson Drive, because it only runs 2 or 3 blocks. And then they built all the condominiums across the street and gave a Thompson Drive address to all those. So there are a lot of addresses now. But the street was named for Dad.
Alice, you had mentioned that you had a memory of World War II rationing.
Oh, yes. The main thing I remember is that shoes were rationed. And I was in college, and I didn't need a lot of shoes. I needed a pair of school shoes until they wore out. So I gave my most of my shoe rationing to my mother because she needed, different types of shoes, and I didn't. And then, of course, meat was rationed. And I remember I had to take my ration book to school with me and turn it in at the beginning of the year. And I seem to remember that you could go to a restaurant and get meat. I don't know quite how they handled that, but as far as meals at home, you were rationed on the amount you could get.
When you girls were going to college in Northfield, did your mother always manage to send a lot of baked goods back to school with you when you went?
Yes, I think she did. I used to mail my laundry home. They used to make laundry boxes for that purpose that had straps that you could tie. I would send my dirty laundry home 1 week, and the next day I would pick up what I had sent the week before, the clean clothing, and I think there were things tucked in there from time to time.
Quite often, if I got a Valentine up there, there'd be a $5 bill tucked inside. And of course, the $5 bill in those days would buy a lot for me.
Yeah.
There's one thing I hadn't mentioned. You asked if Mother was a good cook, and she was, but also she was wonderful to us when we were ill. Mm-hmm. She just was, she was a very kind, tender-hearted, we really were very fortunate in our parents.
We had wonderful parents.
We had wonderful parents.
Unless you two have any more memories of your life, the Cedar Rapids History Center, the Linn County Historical Society would like to thank you very much for sharing your memories with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. We enjoyed it. We were glad to do it.